Welcome to today's webinar, and the topic is really on the the part we did not learn in engineering school. It's now that we have all these skills and tools, that we know the statistics, we know about failure mechanisms and failure analysis tools, and all of the various aspects of risk assessment and estimates and predictions and testing. We still have to communicate that information to our colleagues and peers and our management teams. And we're rarely in a position where we can say, hey, you need to make this better, make this change to make this better. We're rarely in that position. Even as a very senior person, we rarely have the final say, right? Yet we can and should have a tremendous amount of influence over those decisions and the final products that are created or the production facilities that are set up. Our ability as a reliability engineer is often from a position of influence. And so let's break that down a little bit and talk about what do I mean by influence, and also how does it come into play? How do we actively pay attention to creating influence? And so, and I should also mention is I have the chat windows open and it'll be there the whole time. There's a Q&A tab. I'll keep an eye on those and try to address things as soon as I possibly can. And so please chime in. I'm going to stop a few times and ask some questions. And here's the first real exercise of that is, so be prepared to drop in an answer or a thought here. So let's say you've just been hired. You've gone through the interview process and they really liked you. You like the company. You look like a bunch of great people to work with. It's an interesting product. It's in the medical field, and it's an important product. It's used in emergency rooms, for example. And you learn on your first day, one of the quality engineers is giving you a tour of the labs and the facilities and shows you all of these returned products and mentions that it's about 40% of the products come back after the first year. So, I mean, what's your impression of that? And it didn't come up in the interviews, but they were very interested in getting a reliability engineer. But what if you walked into an organization and you learned that they had a 40% failure rate over the first year? What questions would you ask? What would you want to know? Basically, what have you gotten yourself into? Yeah, the read and sign training. Yeah, that's true, Gregory, and especially in a medical group. Let's say you gotten past the HR gauntlet and you're now kind of seeing what's going on in the organization. So gives me it. While I see a handful of people are typing, I'll take a sip of my coffee. And thanks, Cecilia, for mentioning going off to some coffee. So, Sean, you're saying that there's something wrong with the manufacturing process. Yeah, Kevin, I agree. It's a target-rich environment. Well, I guess you could make it worse. You could have a 80% failure rate, but there's plenty of room for improvement. That's for sure. Yeah, and Yvette, I think that's something that there's plenty of different reasons for that. So I would ask more questions, and I agree with you, Ray. Is well, how do you test this? How do you evaluate this? Now, I'd expand that to looking at how is it designed? How is it put together? Um, and is this a major issue? It doesn't seem like there's any major urgency about this. It didn't come up in the interview that I have to go solve this. They basically, my charter was to go um, be a reliability engineer and help us improve the testing, for example, was and a no big urgent requirement. Yeah, is there? time of use? Is there data available, field data available? Is there, um, and yeah, Michael, exactly right. A lot of times returns are underreported. Um, Even a 40% field failure rate. One of the things I asked right away was, how can you stay in business with this? And they said, well, it's a really high profit margin and we can afford to ship 2 units for and still make a profit. So senior management doesn't seem concerned about that because we're profitable. And the general manager has actually said that, well, yeah, customers complain. That's what they do. Yet we're returning all of these, we're getting these units returned, replacing them with new units. We're getting messages back from the field service that the customers are upset with this. So yes, it's a target-rich environment, and it's time to go sort out what's going on. Now, this could be a case study in what to do, yet this is your first day, and you need to you get a honeymoon basically as the new reliability engineer, yet you also don't want to waste that. You want to make sure that your recommendations and proposals actually take hold and actually make a difference. Yeah, social media probably would kill them. This was a few years ago when I actually ran into this circumstance. A few of the details have changed in market and type of product and all those things are changed. And they were at a little bit above 40% first year field failure rate. And they had a 2-year warranty. So some customers actually received 3 or 4 brand new units during the warranty period just to keep it going. And I did ask about warranty costs, and they only tracked and recorded the cost of the parts that were used to repair a unit. So there was a motor that was part of the dominant failure mechanism, and it only cost $5. So every time they did a repair, they only charged their warranty side $5. And they didn't count call center costs, field service costs, the replacement unit costs, engineering time, any of those things to do this. And so it was an insignificant amount on their balance sheets of what their warranty costs were. Yeah. And the policy was basically ship it. We're making money. Don't break it, or don't fix it. It's not broken. We're making money. And yet coming in even on the first day, we as reliability professionals can say, something's not right here. This technology should be in the, maybe 5% per year. It's not that complex of a product. So something else is going on here. Yeah. No, Ray, they didn't have all that much no trouble found. It was usually a dead unit, and um, it would not power on. It did not function, and they could find it was like 3 or 4 things that were very high on the Pareto, a handful of electronics kind of things in miscellaneous like drop damage and stuff. Almost everything though was directly to one of the subsystems just not working, and a variety of different reasons, but in a large degree, a lot of the subsystems in this particular product were under designed for the environment and loads they would see. So anyway, they ended up with this big, huge failure rate. You're the new reliability engineer in the group, and you could spend the rest of this week and answer all of these questions you've asked. They're all valid. They're all things to go learn some more about. And you go find more information. You could build a case basically saying, you know, hey, this is a problem. And we need to do something about this. But one of your first hurdles you realize is nobody seems to think this is a problem. So taking a look at, and we're going to talk about 9 different elements that contribute to your ability to influence the situation. And so the first one is really what's the context. And in this organization, they have such a large profit margin, and they're not actively cataloging or tracking the cost of unreliability, and they're not really listening to their customers. but they think they're okay because they're still in the black. They're still making money. Now the senior management is looking at what's the next generation product? How do we continue to expand the market reach we have? They're hitting resistance, but they're dismissing the resistance as not being associated with the product's performance. So if you walked in and said, hey, we have a 40% field failure problem, you would probably be quickly brushed aside as saying, well, we still make money. Don't worry about it. So given that context, how would you approach that discussion? Just leading with 40% failure rate is probably not going anywhere given the management attitude and the direction that they've given the rest of the organization. So how would you adjust your first set of exploratory proposals? What information would you need in order to address this context that you're facing? A little bit tougher problem, but if you just go out and say, hey, this is too high of a failure rate, you're going to get a great big so what? Yeah, customer satisfaction is part of it, but in and of itself, in what regard, Thomas? So how does that make a difference to this management team? I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. My coffee's starting to get cold. Oh, going back, look for the bad actors. Now, what do you mean by bad actors? Are you looking for somebody to blame? Market share, competition? Yeah. And if you dig a little bit into it, Thomas, these guys actually were finding that they were losing market share. Now, that was important to parts of the organization. So that's a toehold on making an argument that reducing the failure rate might improve your market share. No, there's not a competing product internally. They were pretty much a one product, uh, one one product family, I should say, and they had different feature sets on the same basic product. Yeah. So Sean, the idea of this 40% failure rate between loss of repeat customers, the customer satisfaction angle, so the revenue loss, but also what does that 40% failure rate really uh, manifest itself as? If I can cut it in half, how much more profit is there? Now, if profit is key, then you can put it in the context of profit, not failure rates. Yeah, Cecilia, I think, most companies look at and these guys were good. I mean, they wanted to make a good product and have good features that did what it was supposed to do. I don't think there was any, cash cow kind of mentality or anything, but they were motivated by that they were making a profit. And so given that environment, that attitude and so on, is you got to adjust what you're talking about instead of failure rate, and that's too high, to look at all the profit we're losing by having products fail. So it's a subtle change to the way you bring a proposal to the table and bring awareness to the issue, is understanding the lay of the land, basically. Um, Given why I chose this picture, is what's driving the decisions that they're making now? What are their priorities? And so, as much as possible, yeah, exactly right, no blaming, but given how they're making decisions and the information we can expose to the table, and say, hey, look, if we knock this 40% failure rate down, we would need fewer retesting, fewer repair people, fewer shipping and receiving parts. And 40% returns and replacing it with a brand new unit, imagine the impact to your manufacturing capacity. What if we had the capacity to make 20 to 30% more units per year with the same equipment, right? So starting to look for what was important to the organization and then framing how you start exposing the problem in that context. So that's one idea. Is it's the same problem, just different language around it and different parts of it that we emphasize. So context is important. Yeah, strategy is another piece of this. Is it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to say, hey, we need to cut the 40% field failure rate to 20%, and it has advantage for manufacturing capacity. It has this advantage for profit. It has this advantage for customer satisfaction and increased revenue. Those are all good things, and I think people would be interested in that. But if we as a reliability engineer came in and said, all right, we need to reduce failure rate, this 40% thing is unacceptable. Here's all the benefits if we reduce it, but you're going to get the blank look at you because that team probably does not know how to do that. What they had been doing was good enough until you came in. And now we're saying there's an opportunity to increase profit, for example. But what do we do different? What's the plan? You've created a vision or a proposal that says, hey, change something. And I've seen it a couple times in the comments. There's no blaming. It's not that we were doing anything wrong. Yep. Well, between you and me, I would say there was plenty of wrong things going on. But I need to figure out as the reliability professional coming in, or you need to figure this out as coming into this organization, what were the root causes of the product going out in the condition it was? Was it a set of goals and the modeling and the directions they got? Did they have the wrong impression of what the use environment was? Maybe the actual environment is much harsher, so it causes higher loads and more failures. Welcome, Christine. Never too late. And I think the first few minutes of this you could pick up on the recordings. But the strategy in order to convey that a workable, meaningful proposal is by laying it out as here's where the underlying issues are, and here are steps to solve it. So do we need to do training to come up with the speed with what is reliability and how does a reliability model might help you? How do we get components from vendors that are durable and will fit our requirements? How do we understand the customer's environment and all those pieces? But then fill in the blocks of what we typically do with a reliability plan but addressing the specific issues that would help them move forward and to create a product with a lower failure rate. So the overall goal or proposal might be reduced failure rate, but then the strategy is tied to where they are now and what they need to do different and laying out the steps and the process to do that. But it also has to do with, are they capable of doing that? So if we wanted to triple the amount of testing, but there was no floor space and we would have to build another building, that's a tougher strategy to implement. Let's try to make the initial strategies quick wins and easy things to do, is that it shows progress. That helps to build your credibility. And we'll talk some more about that in a few minutes. Yeah. So some of it is to improve their maturity. Yeah, exactly right, Neil. It's to help them figure out, how do we design for reliability? How do we test to make sure that we're achieving that, get the right feedback mechanisms? That might be the series of issues, but then your strategy has to take those into account. And ideally, your strategy has two levels. One is, how are you going to achieve your goal, a proposal of, say, reducing the field failure rate? But two, how are you going to use the strategy to build credibility? Because there's parts of the process that's going to take resources and investment and time to implement. And that's all based on your influence of when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So building credibility, building quick wins and improvements, and it all being hung together and making sense will help you as a strategy to build your influence also. The other part is timing. I remember one time I was asked to do a accelerated life test, and I knew that the tests on the product I was working on often took quite a while, like 4 to 8 months. and depending on the particular product line that this company had and the nature of the product, we were constrained. It was the temperature would accelerate it, yet it was a polymer base, so if you got too high of temperature, it would melt. So there was a very small window for acceleration, and so it took time. And so I asked, when do you need the answer? When do you need to know if this will last 10 years or not? And the answer initially was, well, yesterday, we're kind of late already. And I says, well, sorry, can't help you. And he says, ideally, I need it in 4 months. Okay, so I went away and did some calculations, and the next day I came back and said, I can get you, a 60% confidence that we're at least 90% reliable, given the sample size and capacity we have for this test. Is that good enough for you to make a decision? And no, not really. What if you had another month? And we did some more calculations, and we basically negotiated when they needed the results. And then we got to work creating the test and putting it together and gave updates and milestones. But if I wouldn't have asked that, and I would have come back to him in, say, 6 months or 8 months and said, here is the results of your test, it's not good enough, it would have been after the point they would have decided to ship the product or the major milestone that they were using. So it would have been too much information, too little, or too late, I should say. So if you're doing, say, a capital improvement, say the strategy to reduce the failure rate for this hypothetical company was you needed, say, a halt equipment. You needed $100,000 of equipment and setup so we could evaluate the product for robustness during the development phase. Well, if I make that proposal a week after the capital budget has been approved for the next year, it's going to be much more difficult to get that capital because they've already gone through the process, the organization's gone through the process to sort out what's our capital budget and what's our spend plan for the next year or so. So understanding the context of your organization and how things work and who makes decisions and what are the existing processes can help you to get your timing right. But this also extends to conversations. So if you're invited into a staff meeting, again, it's looking at what's the context, what's the flow of discussions. Is it the right time to make your proposal? Is it a quick conversation to see if somebody's receptive or not? And your timing may say, let me help you solve that problem. And they ask, what are you working on? Well, I'm working on reducing the 40% field failure problem. And then take it from there and lay out your proposal. But part of timing is waiting for your audience to be ready to listen to you. But also from a business context, it's fitting into the rhythms that are already existing within your organization. Both of those can help you build your influence. So a couple quick general rules, and some of these are pretty obvious. But this being honest is, it's not sensationalized. Oh my gosh, you got this 40% problem. Customers are leaving in droves and blah blah blah. If you've got data that can support those superlatives, then let the data speak for itself. But also be true to yourself, right? If the rest of the organization is not seeing this as a problem, is it really a problem? And let's take a quick close look at that and find out why and ask those questions that we started off with when you face this issue. But if you're the only one interested in it, either you're not making the case clearly to other people, or it's not really a problem, right? So don't get too attached to a proposal just because it's your idea. Ideally, the best ideas are carried by other people, right? It might be your seed or your influence that caused people to take on a project. But once they buy into it and take off with it, it's a whole lot better. So it's a way to find out whether this really is a problem or not. Others in the organization agree and take on roles to solve it. So being honest with yourself, what's the right approach to this? What can I really do? What's the strategy or steps that can be accomplished? What can I do along with the rest of the people in this organization to move forward with this? But then also be honest with the data you're presented, with the slides you're presenting. You know, if you've got a well-worn copy of How to Lie with Statistics, well, you might want somebody to double check your data, you know, kind of thing, being facetious there. But part of this, and I agree with you, Neil, is this comment about assessment is also being honest to the rest of the organization. So part of laying out a proposal or a plan is laying out a vision for what could be, but that is reflected on what they're currently doing. And so if the current design process is no reliability goal, no apportionment, no testing that verified they're meeting the requirements, no halt testing to find out where the weak links were, and I would get nervous in that organization as a new reliability engineer. But part of it is reflecting, well, if your stated objective is to make a product that lasts at least 2 years, here's the evidence that it's not lasting there, and here's your design process that's creating it, and lay it out in detail as facts. Let the facts speak for themselves, and try not to get. So I have trouble with this when it becomes something to do with MTBF. As many of you know, if somebody brings up that topic, then I usually get on a soapbox and kind of rant for a while. I have found that that doesn't usually have a lot of effect. It's not a lot of influence there. Another piece to this is being congruent. And so this is a combination of your body language, your presentation mode, your consistency of action. So if it's a serious problem, you need to stand straight and in a serious voice with serious slides or materials or reports that back it up. So I would not put a presentation together saying I did some field failure data analysis and here it shows we have a 40% field failure problem, but then put cartoon figures on the slide, put multiple font colors, and say it kind of in a flippant manner of some sort or as a lighthearted manner and make jokes about it. If our message is really, this is a problem and it's worth solving because it has all of these benefits for us, and it has all of these problems associated with it. So match your message and the delivery of that message to what you're trying to convey. On the other hand, it's also state consistency of purpose. So if you're looking at an overall proposal of reducing failure rate, field failure rate, and then you start looking at optimizing, minimizing cost of purchased parts, and then you start working on contract language for suppliers, and then you start working on manufacturing efficiency and reducing yield loss. Well, what are you working on? Every time you come to the meeting, you've issued like 15 different proposals. Would be consistent is really what I'm trying to say. So there's a couple elements to that. And a third part here is marketing. Now, if the hair on the back of your neck starts to rise and just the distaste for dealing with marketing, and I'm thinking of the Mad Men series in particular, is realize that we're trying to convey information to other people that they then buy into it, that they actually accept the proposals and implement them. It's same as if we're trying to get them to buy a product or buy a new car, for example. So part of our work is to show the benefits. This is why we want to get there. But it's also that we can do it, that it's acceptable, manageable steps in the process of getting there. But then there's also this element of when you do make progress and you start making successes, is let's illustrate those, highlight those, talk about the cases where the mechanical engineer changed the structure for this motor and the motor doesn't fail as much due to improving its vibration, the response to the vibration it's getting. And it's a case study basically in solving a problem, and it was the mechanical engineer's success. Let's celebrate those. That's marketing, right? And so part of this is realize that you're trying to sell something, whether it's a proposal to reduce failure rate or to get capital equipment for improving the test facilities, for example. You're selling that idea or that concept. The same goes in training when you're trying to work with the design team to understand setting reliability goals and the apportionment process, as it's marketing to a large extent. So what's in it for them? What's the benefits? How do they get there? What's the right next step? All of those pieces are part of a marketing program, which then all these things circle back to that you're a trusted resource to help them see the future, but also achieve it. So it's bits and pieces of that. Another whole set in this process of building your ability to influence. Oh, Sean, lost audio? I did do a pause there, so hopefully it's back. Let's see. It shows that my speaker's going. It's back down. All right, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I did a long pause there, and maybe we did lose it. Yeah, yeah, maybe the sound was resisting the change. But uh, Gregory, you bring up a good point, and this is really this flexibility piece and the personal skills. Is change is hard, right? And it doesn't matter whether it's reliability proposals or quality proposals or engineering design techniques or a change to the design review process or a change to the market we're moving into or whatever. Change in and of itself is difficult. Humans just don't like change very often. It has to be a compelling reason to go to a different grocery store, for example. And we're creatures of habit and organizations even more so. Excuse me. So in our ability of creating recommendations and proposals and affecting change is one of the key tenets is you have to be flexible. We're not in a position that this is the way it has to be done. And we'll probably never be in that position. We're not the general manager, right? We're not the senior leadership. And even those positions with their position power don't always have that immense amount of power to say this is the way it's going to be done. Now, owning the budget and who gets hired and fired has a lot of control, but there's still some flexibility built into it to be successful. So as reliability engineers, one of the key pieces is we recognize that there's this big field failure rate problem and we want to reduce that. That's our goal, our objective. Until we arrived in the organization, that was nobody else's goal. So flexibility includes what else can I help improve such that I get, if I can help a mechanical engineer solve a problem that happens to improve reliability, or just as purely gets them a prototype faster so they can do their job more effectively, well, I need to be flexible enough to jump on that team and help them get the prototypes faster. And in some regard, it's building up some favors and some benefits, but it's also that you're a team player. I'm not 100% only thing I ever do is on my goal. It's a little bit selfish when you think about it. But I'm part of a team, and if I can help them solve a problem, they're going to be more likely to help me solve a problem and listen to me. So it's part of that building that credibility and building your influence is the give and take that you do in the day-to-day elements. Now, at some level, you're going to have to stand firm on principles or on tenets that are critically important to you. There's a baseline. And other people have similar constraints or convictions to what they're trying to do. So part of this flexibility is understanding that landscape of what are people willing to contribute to, what are people looking for help on, what are the other people in your organization willing to contribute on and support you on. Now there's a whole range as we're on our campaign basically to reduce field failure rates, there will be people that will be champions for us. Well, what do they need? So if a senior manager says, that's a great idea, I'd love to support it, I need a slide deck on how to explain this to my peers. Well, help them put that slide deck together, right? Give them the ammunition and the information to make it happen. Another person says, we should track this and make sure that it's visible to the organization. Well, it might take some work, but you need to come up with a dashboard or a set of KPIs, key performance indicators, or measures that can be reported regularly, right? So the flexibility part, it goes at interpersonal level to organizational level and fitting into the organization such that it can be part of the organization's culture that is actually changing, but it's not obvious that you're doing it. So in a nuanced way, can I achieve my objectives by letting other people actually accomplish it? It's actually a preferred way to do it, I think, in many cases. But all of this takes, you got to do your homework. You got to do the math, right? And see, Yvette lost audio. So is that out for everybody? I'll just do another quick sound check. I didn't do a long pause there. Still there, still there. All right. Not sure. Okay. I wonder what's going on with that. So anyway, part of what we're doing in building our own influence is that we're ready for the conversations. So not only are conversations about our proposal and steps and strategy to reduce the field failure rate, but also on how the organization works and what are the challenges facing the electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, system engineers, software engineers, and the management teams, quality, manufacturing, procurement teams. What are their challenges? And how can I help that? How can we as reliability professionals be prepared to help them, right? Maybe it's facilitating a risk assessment program, FMEA study, that it helps them understand the risks of their design. Of course, that helps us with the reliability program, but it helps them learn the tool and actually implement it. But on the other side, it might be tracking down failure analysis or doing vendor assessments to see if they're a viable vendor across all of the reasons we want to do this. So a number of different reviews and taking a look at what's available, but is understanding the field data, what data is available, understanding customer complaints, understanding the other departments and what are their motivations. Be prepared for when the senior manager for field service says, well, I'm not really interested in reducing the failure rate because half of my staff is fixing field failures. And once I got over 50 people in my organization, I became a vice president. I got better pay bonuses. I got a company car. I travel first class. I'm not interested in reducing my department and losing all those things. So there's an obstacle for you. Being prepared is understanding where that obstacle is and what are the motivations. And some people are motivated by their bonuses, by their pay and perks, not necessarily by serving the customers with a good product. So preparation includes that context and strategy, but also includes the deep technical knowledge on reliability engineering and statistics and how things work, and understanding what are the motivations and challenges for the other departments that you're working with, the other groups in the organization. And that does take plenty of conversations, plenty of research, plenty of asking questions in order to build your preparation. Stand up straight, right? You got this. When I first mentioned this problem at the start of the webinars, you walk in, you're a new hire, the company's kind of laissez-faire. We're doing good. We're making money. We're glad you're here. Go figure out what you want to work on. We'll focus on some specific ideas later. No big urgent project. And then you found that you had a 40% field failure rate, and nobody was really too worried about it. Now, most of us most of you that commented on this, and I knew I was at the time, was pretty confident you could do something about that and can make a huge impact to this organization. So a combination of your technical skill and your experience and background, plus understanding the organization and what's motivating them, what's not, where your champions lay, who can help you make this happen, what are the steps you can do to incrementally make progress to achieve a significant reduction in the field failure rate. But yes, it can be exceedingly frustrating. There's roadblocks all the way along the way, right? There's tons and tons of those things. Yet, if you've got a clear vision, and all you need is a couple of champions in your corner to give you assurance that you're on the right track. Ideally, you have a great manager that's behind you and supporting you with the effort. That they might not know what to do. That's why they hired you. Well, take the confidence where you can based on your experience, your resume, your background, and your insight. But then also, there's this phrase I've heard a few times. I'm not really sure uh, it works, but I suspect it does. Is this fake it till you make it kind of thing. And part of that is stand up, stand straight, use a solid voice, convey the information in your data because you did the preparation, answer questions because you understand the context and the motivations where those questions and resistance is coming from. Stay consistent in all of those elements and with the touch of flexibility that allows you to um, hear and understand what the other people are saying and help them solve problems so that you can make progress towards solving the issue of a high failure rate, for example. But part of it is be calm. I saw a study that if where they um, asked people just to smile, to consciously smile, to look people in the eye as they meet them in the street, perfect strangers, smile. Just look at them and smile. Don't say anything, don't do anything else. And what they found was that with consistent, deliberate practice of doing that versus not doing that, is that the weeks were the perception of that person is that their week went better, that they had accomplished more, that they were happy. And so the same goes for confidence. By taking a confident pose, people respond to you that you have confidence, which reinforces your self perception of what you're doing. Now, if you're anything like me, you constantly have this voice in your head that's saying, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. This is a problem. They're not accepting this. This is a challenge," and that running dialogue of all the what if that you're not doing it right. Well, listen to that. Sometimes that actually is meaningful, but also realize that when you've got your act together and you've done your homework and you're making a proposal, it doesn't help to say, well, maybe I'm not real sure. This might be a good idea. If your body language and your voice conveys that message, well, it's not going to build a lot of influence to actually anybody else picking it up. So vice versa, there's this whole set of different tools and techniques that lead to us building our own confidence, but more importantly, the confidence of our team working with us that we're actually contributing value to the organization and to what they're doing. And that can build their confidence in our ability as a reliability professional. So a little bit of both. A big piece of it, though, actually is that body language and how you come across. It's pieces of it. So obviously, each one of these topics are huge in and of themselves. But what would you do? You're in an organization, it's the first day, right? And let's say 3, 4 months from now, um, what would your state of influence be? What would happen when you walk into the staff meeting for the new project? Well, let's say you've made progress on reducing the existing product field failure rate. You've done some training. You've changed the way they test products and release them. You've made some significant changes in the organization, and you've been invited into the new product team. What's going to happen there? what's the situation there, and what would you expect to happen? I'm going to switch over to the conclusion page so you can download the slides um, and the paper if you'd like it. But the chat window now is over on the left side. What would you do, or what would you expect, I should say, that after 3, 6 months of making some contribution, you're invited into a program team looking at a new product, that launching a new product development process. I mean, it could range from when you walk in the room, everybody goes quiet and tenses up, to, all right, Cecilia's here, we can get started now. Uh, to to what? What would you expect? Yeah, a little bit of, to some extent, I think the idea of having the reliability principles understood is that they're probably going to ask better questions of you instead of who are you and what are you doing here, right? Yeah, you would have a bit more influence. And one of the indicators is they would set up their product requirements document and they would ask you for, is this goal appropriate? Is it phrased correctly? For example, they would ask for advice. They would, basically look to you as the expert in the room on reliability engineering, which you probably are, but it would be initiated by the other members of the team. Yeah. And they would start to look at you for, well, what's your proposal in this case? We're starting a new product development. What should we do? What's our strategy? What's our plan? Can you put that together? You know, another way you might see this is, well, are we asking the right questions and looking at you to answer that? Are you asking, do we know the environment well enough? Do we have the right technology? Do all those kinds of aspects? Yeah, Christine, that's the one-on-one and looking for what's important to the individuals is a wonderful tool for building your influence. It's listening, essentially, and understanding what are their challenges. One, it gives you the opportunity to help them, but two, it lets them know that you're actually interested in listening and willing to help if not able to. Yeah, especially being invited at the start of the program. It is very frustrating when you're invited in and they're already shipping the product and they've had a huge failure rate and now they want you to solve it. Well, that's a tough situation to be in. But if you prove yourself and you build the influence that you've been looking to build as your credibility and your ability to improve the reliability of the product, that's all building your influence. And one way to know that it's happening is you're invited into the start of the program. You were great helping us with the existing product. How can we get this one right as we start the development process? And they look to you to help them do that. Yeah. So reviewing the specifications, looking at all the information, talking about the concerns of everybody else is, again, just building your credibility, building your influence within the organization. But it's happening when you're invited, you have a seat at the table, and people listen, right? You can start seeing the changes that are affected because of your recommendations. Now, does it matter if you get credit for it or not? No, not really, no. You know, it's one of those tenets of, if you do good things, it'll come back around. I don't think I think very few, good or bad practices or tasks go unrecognized. It may take a while, right? It may be a while. It may be difficult for others to recognize it. But if you're in the business to look for the parking space and becoming the vice president and getting promotions and awards and all those things. And that does motivate some people. Well, it's just a different focus for where your influence goes, right? So if those things are important to you, you would probably include a submission to the awards team, for example, or making a pitch that you could have a whole lot more capability and influence if you got promoted. But as reliability engineers, many times our ability to influence the team is very quiet. It's doing our job and helping other people make good decisions. In, so to some extent, we're enablers, to put it in a different way, is we can set up a set of metrics or tools or measures or processes that simply let the rest of the organization make good decisions. And those good decisions happen to improve the reliability. So it's a combination of all of those things. Yeah, you know, help celebrate the successes and uh, help other people feel good about achieving the objective of reducing the field failure rate, as the starting example goes. But any questions? I didn't really pause long enough there to ask for some questions, but I gave you a quick scenario. There is the slide deck. It's a good size, a good number of images, I guess, are in it. And there's a paper that I wrote for a conference a few years ago that you can have that's basically outlines these same topics and extends the example a little bit. Yeah, well said, Neil. Even though there's an I in your name, there's no I in team. And a big part of our ability to influence is by working well with a team. And part of that is well, all of these 9 things I talked about today. All right. Well, my coffee's cold now, so I think it's time to go find another one. So hopefully, Cecilia, you enjoyed your coffee. You mentioned that you were off to get one before the start, so hopefully that worked out for you. And thanks everybody for attending. Let me know if you have any questions. Also, keep in mind that the recording of this with the video and so on will be available in a couple of days on the Accendo Reliability site underneath the Accendo Reliability webinar series. I think it's under the tab of reliability.fm, which is a podcast network. There's a handful of podcasts there. If you're not already a member of Accendo, please consider joining it. It's free. You get access to these recordings of the past webinars, but also ebooks and a handful of other references and resources, and more material coming up all the time. Plus, you get a one email a week that is basically a catalog of all the new material on the site, so you can stay up to date what's coming up on the site. But if at any time, if you have questions or you have a challenge or you're looking for a reference or a resource or something, let me know. I'm more than happy to help. Oftentimes that becomes a seed for one of these webinars or for an article under the articles tab, one of the blog posts. So next month, I think I'm looking at the process control and stability, SPC type stuff, and what's our role with the quality group when we're dealing with process control and with our suppliers, with our own organization. It has a huge impact on reliability, and it's something we should master and be involved with in many ways. So we'll talk about that more in detail. You can find that at Accendo Reliability underneath the live events. There's the link there to register for next week. And then I note one of my things is I got to come up with some more topics for the next few months. So if you have ideas of what you'd like to hear about or talk about in these discussions, please let me know, and we'll get some ideas of yours on the discussion. And if you'd like to join me, let me know. We'd be happy to do that. So Sean, the name of the podcast in Stitcher there's 3 of them, and you can find all 3 of them listed on reliability.fm, that website. But there's the Accendo Reliability webinar series. There's Speaking of Reliability, and there's Dare to Know. interviews with quality and reliability thought leaders. And I'm expecting to add another one that's more focused on maintenance and maintenance planning um, from James Kovoke, and I'm just going to avoid saying his last name. James K. Is in the works of putting his podcast together, and we should have it launched by the end of the month. Um, but you should be able to find them. I find the if you search for the word reliability under the podcast listings, the three of these podcasts show up pretty high, and a handful of others in the list. Okay, and welcome to all the thanks and appreciate that. Thanks for attending. Let me wrap it up here and thank everybody for joining me today and all of the comments and input. I sure appreciate it when it's more of a two-way street. And look forward to seeing you next month, if not sooner, somewhere along the line with the Ascendo